I am Ben Doc Askins, the psychedelic science war storyteller, and this is the Anti-Hero's Journey podcast. What's going on out there, Anti-Hero's Journey podcast fans, friends, family, frenemies, whoever else might have stumbled into listening to this podcast, whatever rabbit hole you were following down on the internet and wound up here. I appreciate you showing up and giving us a chance to have a fun conversation today. This is Doc Askins. This is my podcast, and I'm bringing you another Q5 episode where I ask a wide array of people the same 5 questions, and you could listen to different episodes and compare notes, see how similar and how different everybody actually is once we scratch below the surface. If you don't know who I am or anything about me, you can go to antiheroesjourney.com and buy my book, which is my life story told as if it were a psychedelic assisted therapy session. So it's a bit of a trip. It's kind of wild, dedicated to Hunter S. Thompson and Jesus H. Christ. That'll give you a peek behind the curtain of what to expect with that one. All right. It's got a 5-star review from a 3-star general. That's 8 friggin' stars. Go check the thing out, or don't. I sincerely don't care. Either way, if you need some mental health care and you live in the Louisville, Kentucky area, you can come see me at my clinic. Check out the website, advancedpracticeproviders.com, or give us a call at 502-771-1113. Love to help you out. These 5 questions that I'm about to ask to my guest today are questions that I will ask in preparation for ketamine-assisted therapy in that clinic. So here's a peek behind the curtain with my new friend, James Eshelman. James is a psychedelic guide, transformational coach, public speaker, community builder, and psychedelic policy advocate. In early 2017, James was working in finance and struggling with depression, alcohol abuse, and lacked real purpose in life. On January 31st, 2017, while sitting at his desk, in a moment of clarity and courage, he stood up and quit his career on the spot. Oh, that's some Jerry Maguire shit there. 4 days later, he participated in his first ayahuasca ceremony, and a new chapter in his life began. He would eventually go on to become a psychedelic apprentice, assisting in over 100 ayahuasca ceremonies that served over 1,500 plus individuals. James, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast today, my friend.
Thanks for having me, Doc. It's cool to hear that story told back to me and get to relive it a little bit.
Yeah. It's always weird looking in the mirror, hearing it in somebody else's voice. Sounds weird in my ears. Yeah. Right on. Well, let's get rocking and rolling with the first question, man. What's your story?
Well, my story is that I was raised in the Midwest, a small town in Illinois, and my great-grandfather started a steel forging business back in the 50s, and my grandfather ran it, and then my dad ran it, and there was this long lineage of business people who worked in sort of a very blue-collar industry, and so I had kind of a traditional upbringing, and it was supported by a small community where I was raised with a lot of family members and people who had been close to family members, and so my world was pretty small, and I was very active in sports and athletics. I was a swimmer growing up and a football player, and my life was kind of on the route of kind of following in the footsteps of the people who came before me, and running eventually, had plans to run the company and live life in a small town. And going into college, I studied finance to maintain that thread of business person in the family, and it was something that I really actually enjoyed quite a bit. But I had kind of this innate gift, I think, in tracking and understanding what was going to be valuable or useful within sort of the business sense. So, I loved investments. I loved looking for companies that were doing cool things and allocating resources and assets into those companies. And so I found that, finance was a space where I felt like I had a gift that I could apply into the world. And over the course of 3 years in the professional arena, I just started to feel a greater and greater amount of resistance as I tried to push my way into the space and become what I wanted to become, and or thought I wanted to become, and that's when I started really experiencing depression, anxiety, and then coping with the stress of all of that with alcohol and so yeah. And 2017 was when I sat in my first ayahuasca ceremony, and that's where I started to see that what I wanted versus where I belonged were two very different kind of interpretations of life and what life had in store for me. And so this venture into psychedelics has been a very personal journey of self exploration and self healing and finding my own purpose in life. And it's also been a mechanism of being in service to other people and helping other people in ways that maybe I needed help along my own journey. So it's been a really cool opportunity to just venture into service and support people in the ways that I kind of always wanted people to support me. So I've been facilitating psilocybin journeys in Denver, Colorado for the last 5-6 years, and have found my way into policy advocacy, helping push through and support the implementation of our statewide decriminalization measure, and also the legalization of psilocybin for medical use in the state of Colorado.
Yeah, tell me a bit more about some of the details on that at the end there. The Prop 122 stuff with Colorado is super interesting for the rest of the country and everybody in this space. I know a few other folks that had worked behind the scenes around some of that, Colorado led the way in terms of the legalization of cannabis over a decade before Prop 122 came through. And it seemed like there were a lot of legal, regulatory, and just market lessons learned from how cannabis got rolled out after the legalization there that got put into how the legislation got designed for Prop 122. How much could you kind of illuminate both the development process there and like your expectations for how that's going to look over the next couple of years? Is what it sounds like they're going to, plant by plant, say how this is going to work. Maybe. Is that accurate? What do you think?
Yeah. I don't have a whole lot of familiarity around the cannabis law and the nuances of what was learned along the way to make the psilocybin access a little bit more, intelligent. But I can speak to the law itself and how it's being implemented here and what I kind of anticipate is going to take shape into. It essentially has two parts. One is the decriminalization. So all plant medicines, or the plant medicines that were decriminalized, were psilocybin, DMT, mescaline, and ibogaine. And so that effectively creates a personal use law in the state of Colorado, which says that the personal possession of these substances has a lower priority for criminal law enforcement than jaywalking, which all but pretty much legalizes the substances for personal use. And then the other side of it is the legalization of psilocybin for legal healing centers, so state licensed healing centers. And then the other substances will be worked into the program in the future if the state deems it useful and workable from a licensure perspective. So right now, where the state's at is we're in the rulemaking process. So much of the rules for how these healing centers and how the state licensed facilitators of plant medicines will be licensed and trained, those rules are now going through the process of becoming, statewide rules, so that facilitators can begin being trained here in the near future. And then come 2025, we're looking at probably spring, summer, is when the first state licensed facilities and state licensed facilitators will begin to serve these medicines under the program. So we've made a lot of progress in a really short amount of time, but the way that it's rolling out right now, I think has been really intelligent. The state was wise in how they brought a lot of different stakeholders together. It wasn't perfect. I think that various different interest groups can maybe look at it and think that there's some inherent problems in the program and how it was created and implemented. But I think it has been intelligent as in terms of, really incorporating as much feedback and insight into this space and as possible, while also, maintaining safety for the participants and for the facilitators, for all stakeholders.
Okay, that makes sense. Can you give me a little bit more insight into your like Jerry Maguire moment there, and then like what why ayahuasca and why that particular medicine called your name, and what's that journey been like?
Yeah. Well, the Jerry Maguire moment was, I think in a lot of ways those moments of epiphany are, we finally take action. For me, it was a buildup, a slow and steady buildup of just discontent with where I was. And so it was January 31st, and I was sitting at my desk and I felt just this, real clear message that I needed to quit my job. And so it was as though it was sort of an out of body experience. It was like I was being moved by something outside of myself, and like all my concerns, whether like what I was going to do financially, what I was going to do with my next job, what it meant for me to quit my job in that moment and leave the finance space. Like all of that didn't really matter. It was just like, I just needed to take this one action and trust that everything else would sort of fall in line. So I walked into my manager's office thinking I was going to get, give a 2-week notice. And she just kind of, told me that security was going to escort me out of the building in 5 minutes, which was a real blessing in allowing me to relinquish, any fears or trepidation that I had that it was the right decision. And so then, Aya was a medicine that called to me early 2011, when I'd watched DMT, The Spirit Molecule, which is a documentary about dimethyltryptamine. And it essentially just planted a seed in me that there was a substance out there that could help me, connect to something outside of myself, something bigger, call it God or source or the divine, what have you. And so when I moved to Denver in 2016, I had found a gentleman who was facilitating these experiences for folks, and we just began developing a personal relationship, and it felt like an opportunity that I didn't want to pass down. And it also was really kind of calling to me just the possibility and potential of what it could offer me in terms of my own healing. But I had no idea that it was going to turn into, a career in this work.
Yeah. Give me maybe like a high low of that experience now. Like you went out and bounced from a traditional path to a much more non-traditional calling. What's been the high point and the low point of moving over to working in the psychedelic space?
The high points and the low points are kind of like in a lot of ways intertwined. One is I had to really shed the identity and all the investment that I had made into my degree and into my career and into the identity that I had as somebody who would be, a financial, some kind of a financial wizard, some kind of a big investor. And that was a really important identity to share, but it was pretty painful and quite risky. So, a lot of the low point was just feeling really depressed and feeling like my self-esteem too had been wrapped up in this identity that I had, that this was, something that was going to help me feel like a valued member of society. But it was all really superficial in terms of how I was going to be valued in the world. And so then the high point with the work that I had done is that the value that I was bringing into the world was more fundamental and inherent in who I was and how I be in the world, rather than what I know and what I can do, which has been a really special experience to build my life upon a foundation of virtuosity and fundamental belonging to who I am and what matters most to me and what really brings me into life and brings me to life and makes me feel happy just to, be who I am in the world and be in service to people because of who I am.
Okay. I'll ask people about their stories to ask about memory and about the past. And then I'll ask about intentions as a way of engaging with imagination and about how you project things out into the future. So, given your story, what are your intentions going forward?
My heart's intention is to build a life for myself where I feel as liberated as I possibly can. And I'm a pretty free spirit. I am a shapeshifter. I love to experience everything that life has, to break down the confines and the silos of the, control mechanisms that I've created in my life and really engage with life in, the most creative way that I can. And I think a lot of that has to do with building a world that feels that just feels good to live in. It feels good for me to live in, where belonging is an essential piece of the human experience, and I think a lot of people struggle feeling like they belong anywhere, and so this community building and psychedelic work is important for me to facilitate for other people. Belonging is also really important to me, and so I intend to, over the next 5 to 10 years, begin to develop a lifestyle for myself where I can travel around the world and sit in a variety of different ceremonies, whether they're plant medicine ceremonies, rites of passage, initiations. I really want to go deep into the most fulfilling practices that I can find that cultivate presence, peace, and purpose. And so I've kind of built a lot of that for myself already. And now, my intention is to continue building that out in more robust and fundamental ways.
Okay. So you want to be liberated from some things and still belong certain places. How do you bring those two together?
Well, I think the liberation is, the inner liberation. It's the connection to my spirit and connection to who I am, a fundamental belonging to myself. And then from there is I plan to build out a network of community, both locally wherever I am, and really want to build out community across the world that is focusing on really the same virtues and values that matter, to me, which is just tenderness, love, connection, and a willingness to break down the barriers of the things that kind of hold us captive and hold me captive.
What have you found to be one of the most useful tools or devices for breaking those things down, either for yourself or for folks that you're working with?
One of the primary practices that I have right now is ceremonial tea practice, which is it has roots in Buddhism, where the monks would be meditating in ancient India and meditating all day long. And in order to stay awake, they practice this tea ceremony, which is just this really deep and intentional means of pouring and enjoying tea with one another. And it's this incredibly communal experience that has a depth of presence and a depth of connection that I haven't really felt anywhere else. So that's one modality. And then I also engage in men's retreats and men's rites of passage and initiations, where those practices really push us beyond our comfort zone and force us to engage with our environment and our surroundings and our deeper self in a way that I think that deeper self is really called forward in a transformational way. So that's just a beautiful technology. I mean, any kind of men's work is really special. And then plant medicine is certainly, another one that I think is a beautiful arena for taking you into the deep self and connecting you to the divine. And I'm really curious about ibogaine and want to sit with ibogaine over the next 2 years. That medicine's kind of calling to me. And then I think there's real power in being a part of an intentional community that's committed to virtues and values, shared virtues and shared values that are life-giving and life-supporting. Those are kind of the primary modes.
And you mentioned rite of passage, and that's definitely a big topic to dig into, but it always makes me think of like Maasai tribal rituals, circumcisions in East Africa. Like it's a life-changing sort of thing to go through some of that sort of stuff. What does a rite of passage you think look like in the context in which you've worked, or some of the men's work that you've done? What's that look like?
Yeah, well, I've done a vision quest in the past. So that the vision quest is where you go out into nature with just water and you sit in a 6-foot wide circle for 3 or 4 days, and you're exposed to the elements. You're exposed to challenges, to difficulty, to your own habitual patterns of trying to escape your experience through technology or any other distractions, whether they be food or sex or drugs. It really forces you to, get in really intimate with yourself. And because you're water fasting, you also clear your system out of a lot of toxins from the environments in which we live. So that's a beautiful ritual and rite of passage. And then I've done some other more intense rites of passages as well, which I probably won't go into too much detail here, but it's a ceremony that has roots in across cultures, local in Native American lineages, Nordic lineages, and then really kind of across the world, which is essentially there's a part of it that has some kind of a sacrifice of blood and flesh. And it's a beautiful ceremony. It's really difficult. I think all of these rites of passages, right, are meant to push you beyond your comfort zone, beyond the sort of structures of the old self, and into so deeply into discomfort that you have to lean into, this sort of more deeper, more durable sense of self. And then, I think a lot of, my future going forward is becoming a student of, and a greater student of these, global communities, or these communities across the globe that engage in, various different rites of passages and initiations.
Yeah, those are some good intentions for sure. Virtuosity and virtue. Excuse me. The way that I'll bridge the past and the future and try to bring things into the present moment for people is via gratefulness. So I just ask, what are you grateful for?
Gratitude is a practice that feels often really difficult to maintain consistency with, for me. A real depth of consistency that I know is available, but I do find myself just being really grateful for the subtleties of life, whether it is just a sunrise or a sunset, or, the way that a lover touches me, or, even the way that water can sort of hit your lips in the right way when you're dehydrated. And also too, I think I feel really grateful for, the opportunities that I've been afforded in life to go into this work and do this work, and to be supported along the way. My lifestyle is pretty unconventional, and I've been I've just been supported with beautiful teachers along the path who've taken me under their wing and helped guide me in ways that I never really could have imagined. And I'm really grateful for the depth of purpose that I feel in my life. I feel like my life has a lot of meaning to help people in a way that feels really authentic to me.
So with all of your story and all of your intentions and all of that gratefulness, what are you creating in the world, James?
I really feel like I'm creating myself. I really feel like I'm consciously choosing the life for myself that is in the most alignment with my soul's purpose in this life. So, tactically, my career, it allows me to have these really deep and meaningful connections with people, and where I get to have the conversations that really truly matter to me, that aren't just something to pass the time or something to entertain me, though they are entertaining, but they actually strike at a really deep chord in me. So that's a beautiful thing. And I think my next, as I mentioned, I really am stepping into this intention and desire to make rites of passage, initiation ceremonies that cultivate presence, peace, and purpose more accessible to people, not just locally in the United States, but I really am intending to build out a community that's making this accessible to people across the world.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That brings us around to the fifth and final question, everybody's favorite, the identity question, which you've alluded a bit to already with what are you creating, myself, but who are you really, James Eshelman?
I'm a really tender person. I have a really robust capacity for tenderness and softness, and I'm also very connected to my emotions and to the things that I feel. I'm incredibly sensitive to what I experience and to my environment and the people who are in my life. I am a pretty inspired and motivated person, and I think I'm inspired deeply by the threads of life that are interesting and are deep and compelling and oftentimes very challenging. So I love to throw myself into the cauldron of life and put myself in challenges and see what I can become through those challenges. I'm a very present person with the people in my life. I really take the time to listen and to hear what people's stories are and what the deeper story of their life is saying and what their energy is saying. And I'm also a creature of style. I love good style. And I think that spans, style in terms of how, we engage with the world on a creative way, whether it's art, even fashion, or the style with which people present themselves in the world, the style with which I present myself in the world. So I kind of like have an affinity for the finer things, and I'm a lover of the subtle too. I love the subtle details of life. I love, the way that the small details are often, if you really pay attention to them, they can really move me.
Well, that's beautiful. You got any final thoughts you want to share? How could anybody get a hold of you if they want to connect with you? Anything along those lines?
Yeah. My website is Center of All Directions, centerofalldirections.com. you can find me there. You can find me on Instagram. My handle is at James Eshelman. And feel free to slide into my DM, send me a private message. You can also set up a consultation call through my website. My website has a good bit of information, but it's pretty vague. So if anything strikes your curiosity, feel free to set up any kind of a consultation call, and I'd just be happy to talk to people about any curiosities that they have. I'll be at the Aspen Psychedelic Symposium at the end of May, beginning of June. I'm doing a panel with some other members from the state of Colorado to talk about the implementation of Prop 122, in addition to, and I'm really excited because I won't be on the stage at the same time as Rick Doblin, but Rick Doblin's also a part of the Aspen Psychedelic Symposium, as well as some other luminaries in the field. So it should be a really good time. And if you happen to find your way out there, track me down. I'd love to talk to you.
Yeah, that's exciting stuff. I've got some friends that are going to be there. If you see the folks from Beyond, Talia Eisenberg and Tom Fiegel, tell them I said, hey. That's where Hunter S. Thompson used to live. He had his peacock farm out there in Aspen and ran for sheriff once upon a time. So, Aspen's near and dear to my heart for sure. Yeah, well, that's awesome. I hope some people look you up and connect with you at the event or via your website or Instagram there. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Doc.
My pleasure. Doc out.